Hello and welcome to my channel. Vice Rhino here. Are you guys ready? Christmas is right around the corner and I've been slacking. I haven't fought in a single battle in the war on Christmas yet. It's almost like in order for there to be a war on Christmas, you have to go out of your way to find battles to fight in. But I mean, ain't that just typical of American Christianity? You gotta manufacture up some persecution in order to keep the flock fired up and energized. Anywho, today we're going to be talking about the war on Christmas, as you might have guessed, and asking ourselves why it even exists. I mean, it doesn't really, but you know what I mean. Let's go! First, let's ask ourselves, what even is the war on Christmas? This is a fun question because while modern viewers hear the phrase and immediately think of right-wing pseudo-news commentators bemoaning red Starbucks cups and the use of the phrase Happy Holidays, the war on Christmas actually has its origins in Protestant Christianity. In England in the 1600s, puritanical Protestants had control of the English Parliament. They considered Christmas to be a popish festival with no biblical justification, popish being a derogatory term that they used to refer to Roman Catholic people and practices that they disapproved of. They saw Christmas as a wasteful extravagance. In 1645, Parliament adopted a document put together by a group of ministers called the Directory of Public Worship. They adopted it as law, making it illegal to worship in any manner not laid out by the Directory. According to the Directory, Sundays are strictly observed as holy days, but no others. They considered referring to the various festival days as holy days to be vulgar and outright banned them and their accompanying celebrations. Over time, this legislation became more strict, with businesses being ordered by the government to stay open on December 25th, and penalties and fines being levied against anyone holding or attending Christmas services. This historical period is when today's right-wing commentators would have actually had something to complain about. People still celebrated Christmas, but quite literally had to do so secretly lest they be penalized for their devotion to celebrating the birth of Christ. And keep in mind, it was the most devout Christians who were the ones arguing against allowing the celebration of Christmas because of how unbiblical such a celebration would be. They carried these beliefs about Christmas with them to the American colonies, with some early accounts of New England Puritans indicating that they went out of their way to begin construction of the first building of their colony on Christmas Day in a show of contempt for it. In 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts passed a law that enacted a fine against the celebration of Christmas. Quote, "Anybody who is found observing by abstinence from labor, feasting, or any other way, any such days as Christmas Day, shall pay for every such offense 5 shillings. And keep in mind here, I'm using the phrase Puritan, which is typically thought of as being a specific branch of the Church of England, but many American Protestant denominations that exist today have their roots in early colonial Puritanism, such as a tiny little group you've probably never heard of called the Baptists. Now, if I ask you about a Baptist position on the war on Christmas, would you think of them as being in favor of making the celebration of Christmas illegal? Because the proto-Baptists in 17th century New England were definitely on that side. I wonder what 17th century Baptists would think if they could see what the Baptist Church has become today. Like, they'd probably be railing against the progressive positions held by even the most conservative of modern Baptists. Although if you really want to get into that, what a Baptist position is on the war on Christmas depends very much on which type of Baptist you are. Because there's no shortage of denominational schisms when looking at Christianity, because apparently God couldn't be bothered to answer his own prayer to himself when Jesus asked God that all his followers, and those that come after him, may be completely unified so that the world can know that Jesus' message is actually the true one. So while the Southern Baptist Convention can still be found regularly complaining about the fact that publicly funded holiday displays are supposed to be secular in order to avoid favoring one religion over another, there are also plenty of Baptist organizations that can be found speaking out about how ridiculous the whole concept of a war on Christmas is in a nation like the United States. My favorite article along those lines comes from the Baptist Standard, and I'm just going to read a bit of it just because it's so delightful. Quote, "I can only imagine what Christians in North Korea or Afghanistan would have to say about American Christians' anxiety regarding Christmas." It goes on to say that the only Christians who face real persecution in the US are Christians of color, female Christians, and LGBTQ+ Christians. They face this persecution not because of their faith, but for other reasons. And some of this persecution comes from other Christians. That's not the kind of statement I expected to find on a website titled The Baptist Standard. Now, I do have to take issue with the "some of this persecution comes from other Christians" bit, though. Statistically speaking, even if non-Christians were equally likely to be bigoted against women, people of color, or the LGBTQ+ community, it wouldn't be some of the persecution coming from Christians, it would be most. But unfortunately, it turns out that Christians and non-Christians are not equally likely to hold such bigoted viewpoints. Christians are, across the board, more likely to hold the more bigoted viewpoints in every category. So, credit where it's due, the author of this article is pointing out that the religion-based persecution of American Christians is, well, non-existent, but don't try to soften the blow. Accept the fact that there are well-established links between religion, not just in general, but also specifically Christianity, and the holding of those bigoted views. But yeah, the main reason I brought up this article was for the Christians in North Korea or Afghanistan bit, because there are places in the world where Christians really are persecuted. And the Christians that live in those places would be ecstatic to face what American Christians call persecution instead of what they actually have to face. Anyway, back to Christmas. The war on Christmas in the United States was initiated by Christians who wanted to ban it because they saw the celebration of Christmas as indulgent, wasteful, and unbiblical. Now, the atheist war on Christmas, inasmuch as there even is one, is simply that we want to be inclusive. There are more holidays at that time of year than just Christmas, so why should we act as though Christmas is the only one? Hell, y'all are out there yelling that we need to put the Christ back in Christmas. Sure, you do that. We're happy to let you have that, as long as you are respectful to however it is we want to celebrate. Should you even want to wish an atheist a Merry Christmas if they can't properly celebrate Christmas without Christ? Now, a lot of these same Christians who pontificate about the war on Christmas can be found at other times of year complaining that when the gays get married, it somehow takes away from their straight marriage. By this same logic, wouldn't atheists, Muslims, Jews, and everyone else being forced to celebrate Christmas, complete with Christ, because they don't believe in Christ, then take away from the actual Christian celebration of Christmas? And what really tickles me with this is just how obtuse the pundits are about it. Take the statements made by SBC President Steve Gaines in 2016. Christmas is about Jesus Christ, and I can't even imagine the pushback many people would have if people tried to come against the Islamic holy days like Ramadan or Jewish holy days. You came so close there, Steve. So close. But the point just went right on past you. See, one of the things that gets Christians all up in arms during Christmas time is the fact that a lot of stores have a policy where their employees will wish people happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas, in recognition of the fact that other religions with other winter holidays exist, and that not everybody celebrates Christmas. Now, please, can anyone who gets annoyed at that just take a second to put themselves into someone else's shoes? How would you feel if not only did a bunch of people start saying Ramadan Mubarak to you everywhere you went for a month in the springtime, but also there were large groups of everyone from media personalities to politicians calling not only for stores to force their employees to say Ramadan Mubarak to everyone as they enter and leave the store, but also for places like Starbucks to have Ramadan-themed cups? Which, yeah, the irony of a restaurant having cups themed around a holiday involving fasting for a month is not lost on me, but bear with me. And also for public spaces to put up displays celebrating Ramadan on the taxpayer dime. I feel like that would earn a major freakout from the pundits. And what's more, often the people who make the most noise about the war on Christmas also consider themselves free speech warriors. They want to force people who don't celebrate Christmas to say Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays in one breath, and then in the next they'll say that putting limits on free speech is the first step towards a totalitarian government, and then they won't shut up about what a violation it is of their rights that they are expected to respect people's preferred pronouns, calling it compelled speech. The government can't force me to call someone they instead of he or she, or even just force me to use the correct gendered pronoun if that goes against my beliefs. But also, the government should make people say Merry Christmas because it's Christmas, not a generic secular holiday. Like, as an example, here's Dennis Prager talking about how horrible it is that corporations are having their employees use inclusive language.
In place of the universal Merry Christmas of my youth, in recent decades I have been wished Happy Holidays by every waiter and waitress in every restaurant I have dined, by everyone who welcomes me at any business, by my flight attendants and pilots, and by just about everyone else.
And here he is talking about how important freedom of speech is to society.
I know that the suppression of free speech leads to evil. There is no example in history of free speech being suppressed and anything good coming out.
And here's a video that is not Dennis himself speaking, but it's from his organization, PragerU, where they point out that compelled speech is not free speech.
The Supreme Court has clearly decided that compelled speech is not free speech. In West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, the Supreme Court upheld the student's right to refuse to salute an American flag. Justice Robert Jackson wrote, "If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, religion, or other matters of opinion."
It's very interesting to me that they can directly quote Justice Jackson when he said, "No official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, religion, or other matters of opinion," but then turn right around and complain that people are not being forced to say Merry Christmas. Even going so far as to claim that saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas is not actually being inclusive, it's being hurtful.
So please say Merry Christmas and Christmas party and Christmas vacation. If you don't, you're not inclusive. You're hurtful.
Future Rhino cutting in, I decided while editing this video that I would do just a minor rebuttal of the points that Dennis Prager made in his Just Say Merry Christmas video, except instead of doing the rebuttal myself, I would let Ben Shapiro from PragerU do that rebuttal for me. So here you go.
But what if you haven't actually been victimized by anybody? That doesn't matter. To the left, so long as you feel victimized, you're a victim. Even if you have never actually experienced discrimination, you've surely been targeted by microaggressions. You know, nasty little words and phrases that weren't meant to be insults, but just are.
Such as the phrase, Happy Holidays.
And facts don't care about your feelings.
Now, I imagine that the main objection that I'll see to this point will be that, no, they don't want companies to force their employees to say Merry Christmas. They just want them to not punish those who choose to. They're not looking for legislation, after all, just the freedom to say Merry Christmas again. Except, as far as I can tell, employees still have that freedom. Now, of course, my own personal experience here is of limited value, but I've worked several jobs in multiple industries that deal directly with the public, from restaurants to hotels to call centers and more, and never once have I ever been directed to use or avoid a specific holiday greeting at Christmas time. Though I do, of course, recognize that there are corporations with these guidelines, I've just never experienced it myself, so it doesn't seem to be very common of a thing. But now, this runs up against another conservative issue. Corporations being considered people for the purposes of First Amendment rights, both when it comes to freedom of speech and religion. The how corporations became people story is long and complicated and has legal roots going back to the 1800s, but to oversimplify, the Citizens United decision of 2010 gave corporations the right to donate money to political campaigns on the grounds that not allowing it would be a violation of their First Amendment rights. And then in 2014, the Hobby Lobby decision gave corporations the right to refuse to cover birth control on the grounds that it violates their religious beliefs. As if a corporation, an entity that exists on paper for tax purposes, could have religious beliefs. Now, given these two precedents, it stands to reason that a corporation should be allowed, on First Amendment grounds, to direct its employees to avoid using religious language that is not in line with the corporate beliefs. And on the other side of that coin, requiring them to use language that is in line with their beliefs should also be allowed. So you'd think the conservative pundits who applauded the Hobby Lobby and Citizens United cases would be right on board with corporations making those kinds of religious decisions without government interference. But even so, even granting the ridiculous argument that corporations have religious beliefs, individual people have religious beliefs as well. And a good argument can be made that an individual employee of a corporation that forbids the use of phrases like Merry Christmas should legally be allowed to say it if they believe that it is a requirement of their religion, at least according to RFRA. Hell, even a bad argument to that end would make it through the current Supreme Court. My point is that individual religious protections in the United States are such that even if an employer did try to ban its employees from saying Merry Christmas, it would be unlikely that such a ban would be considered legal. So given the fact that companies can't actually ban their employees from saying Merry Christmas, and that everyone still has the freedom to say Merry Christmas in pretty much all scenarios, and that even the dreaded liberal socialist politicians like Biden and Obama, who aren't really socialists just for the record, they regularly said and say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
What more could they possibly want? Well, there are already so-called Merry Christmas bills being passed in some states like Texas and Indiana, which enshrines into law a teacher's right to use seasonal greetings such as Merry Christmas, and they try to couch it in terms of religious inclusion, adding on bits about how the school can have a holiday display as long as they include symbols from either more than one religion or from one religion and one secular symbol. Such legislation is a very thinly veiled attempt to get around the fact that public schools are, in fact, public. That is, they are taxpayer funded and are meant to serve everyone in the community regardless of their religious beliefs. As such, they are not, or rather should not, because we all know how that plays out in practice, be allowed to favor one religion over another. In theory, public school teachers and employees are not supposed to say Merry Christmas to the kids, precisely because they are public employees. There are likely kids in their schools that do not celebrate Christmas, and that's not even limiting it to non-Christian kids. There are denominations of Christianity that don't celebrate Christmas, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the Quakers, to name a few. These Merry Christmas bills are meant to allow teachers to say Merry Christmas under the guise of being inclusive, since other religions are technically allowed to as well, but the lawmakers know that the vast majority of teachers, especially in the areas that are actually passing such legislation, will be favoring the Christian holiday. And while that does have the potential to backfire if you manage to find a brave pagan teacher who would be able to use such laws to promote the celebration of Yule in the classroom, that's not very likely, and I would imagine that most such teachers of minority religions would not be willing to risk their livelihoods for the sake of a potential court case that, should it make it up to the Supreme Court, they will end up losing because of the ridiculous bias that the US justice system has towards favoring Christianity over other religions. Actually, that bias exists to a lesser extent in the lower courts as well, so they might end up losing the case all the way up to the Supreme Court, where they'll lose it again. So if you hear me talking about this and doubt that the end goal is to have legislation requiring official observance of Christmas wherever they can get it, I would ask you, what else could their end goal possibly be? If they just want people to be allowed to say Merry Christmas, they are, with the exception of some public employees who aren't supposed to be endorsing any religion while on the job, but who are still free to do so on their free time. And really, most of the time these public employees say Merry Christmas and stuff like that anyway, and they get away with it for the most part. Hell, even Joe Biden gets on camera Christmas Day to wish the country a Merry Christmas, and nobody really cares all that much.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
Now sure, he follows it up with the inclusive Happy Holidays because he knows that he's also representing people that don't celebrate Christmas, but he still says Merry Christmas. So people are allowed to say Merry Christmas, they're allowed to celebrate Christmas, and be public about it. The whole shebang. The other objection I anticipate is that places that serve the public, not just government places but like privately owned but open to the public places, often don't display overtly religious Christmas symbols. But again, this is either because it is government public property, where the displays are funded by tax dollars that do not exclusively come from people who celebrate Christmas and are not exclusively Christian, and so it becomes a choice between let everyone play and just wait until the Satanic Temple shows up with their Baphomet statue, or make your displays secular so that there isn't even the appearance of state-endorsed religion. And you know they're not happy with that choice, but then we get to private businesses that know that not all of their customers will be Christian or celebrate Christmas, and so want to appeal to as broad a demographic as possible in order to maximize profits. So if the lack of Christian symbolism in Christmas displays is the problem, how would that be solved? Well, as far as private companies are concerned, the market solution that conservatives will claim to love turns out to be just allowing them not to put up religious symbolism at Christmas time because they'll make more money if they don't alienate a part of their customer base. So the only way to change that would be, say it with me now, legislation. Now, what about public property? Well, obviously I hold to the position that the government should not be seen as endorsing any religion, and so regardless of whether multiple religions are represented in the displays or not, I'd prefer it to just remain secular. But the compromise that allows religious displays as long as multiple religions can be represented seems like a somewhat reasonable compromise to me. But as we've seen time and time again, when those other religions actually show up and claim their position next to the Christian display, the Christian government employees have a tendency to favor the take their ball and go home strategy rather than the play nice strategy, where they'd rather see nobody have anything than to allow their Christian display to be tarnished by being next to a different religion's display. The only way to fix that so that Christian Christmas displays are allowed on public property and don't offend the Christian government employees to the point of favoring secular displays would be through, say it with me, legislation. And with the hyperbolic language being used, it's not really surprising that sometimes the people fighting to keep the Christ in Christmas will resort to threatening behavior, as was seen this year with the story of the Dedham Library's Christmas tree debacle. The library had apparently decided not to put up a tree this year, which prompted one of its employees to lament on Facebook about how upset she was that they weren't putting up a tree. And when she asked why, she was told that people were made uncomfortable by the tree the previous year. Of course, this sparked an incredulous reaction. Nobody had ever expressed discomfort to her personally, therefore it must never have happened. And then she ended her post with the phrase, "Please bring Christmas back to my beautiful library." Notably, Christmas never left the library. The library was still all decked out for both Christmas and Hanukkah. They simply didn't have a tree up. But that's an attack on Christmas, so it cannot stand. Staff at both the library and the town of Dedham were bullied and threatened by enraged Christians who apparently are unable to celebrate Christmas unless their local library has a Christmas tree up, which is a weird line to draw. I thought the holiday was supposed to be about the birth of your God, not trees and libraries. Now, again, I can already hear the objection. Of course they can celebrate Christmas without a Christmas tree in the library. You're strawmanning them, Vice Rhino. Okay, but if the library not having a Christmas tree in no way impacts their ability to celebrate Christmas, then why would the library not having a tree be worth getting so upset that you resort to threatening and bullying librarians of all people over it? And you know what? You're actually right. It doesn't impact their ability to celebrate their holiday. At all. What it does impact is their ability to force their holiday onto people who don't celebrate it. Yes, those people are in the minority, but that doesn't mean they should be treated as though they don't exist. And that's something that comes up a lot in the videos about the war on Christmas. The fact that 9 out of 10 Americans celebrate Christmas, meaning that even a lot of non-Christians celebrate it. So why not act as though everyone celebrates it, since almost everyone does anyway? And the answer is quite simple. Because 1 out of 10 Americans do not celebrate Christmas. I don't care what the reason is that they don't celebrate it, but they don't celebrate it. And so we should respect their choice to not celebrate Christmas and not force it down their throats. I mean, let's be real here, even if people only say Happy Holidays and strip all the religious symbolism from Christmas in public spaces, they're still going to be bombarded with Christmas crap that would look largely the same as it does now, and they'll still have to tolerate every store playing the same 10 Christmas songs on repeat for a couple of months, so it's not like Christmas won't still be shoved down their throats, but avoiding forcing everyone to be religious about it will make it that much easier for them to tolerate. And if I'm honest, I fucking love Christmas. I am one of the non-Christian celebrators of Christmas. I even enjoy some of the religious aspects of the holiday, though obviously I feel different about them than most Christians do. Like, for instance, I like nativity scenes. They're cute, and they make a good decoration on the mantle. For years, even as an atheist, I have had a nativity scene complete with baby Jesus. We'd even do this little thing where the manger was empty, and we'd have baby Jesus hidden somewhere until Christmas morning, when he was born. But as an atheist, I'm free to play around with the nativity scene without worrying that I'm offending God. As if an omnipotent being is capable of being offended. Christians seem to think he is, though, so Anyway, I now have a Mandalorian-themed nativity scene with Baby Yoda instead of Baby Jesus, and dewbacks instead of the barn animals. Is this sacrilegious? It depends who you ask. Some Christians will be fine with it and enjoy the variety. Others will be incensed by it and consider it to be mocking God. But since I don't believe in God in the first place, I get to do things like this with impunity. So, in the end, if you celebrate Christmas, go ahead and say Merry Christmas to people. With very rare exceptions, even people who don't celebrate it will appreciate the sentiment. But don't get mad when people wish you happy holidays because you think that means they're trying to take the Christ out of Christmas. They are quite literally wishing you happiness for the holiday that you celebrate. Like, Just imagine if someone said, "Have a good day" to you, and you got all upset at them because it's actually the afternoon. Why do they have to be so broad and inclusive, using a greeting that could be appropriate for all the times of day instead of the specific time of day it is now? That would be completely and utterly ridiculous, would it not? Like, clearly the afternoon is included in the day, so "have a good day" is still wishing you a good afternoon, so why would that upset you? The answer is, of course, that no reasonable person would be upset by that. And it's the same thing with happy holidays. Your holiday is included in that, whatever it may be. But I have seen Christians reply to people wishing them happy holidays with anger, yelling at the well-wisher that it's Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays. If someone says that they want you to be happy and that causes you to get angry because they didn't use the exact phrase that you would have preferred, what does that say about you? That's it for this one. Today's comment of the day comes to us from Robbie Rouser, who says, "You still need a rhinoceros costume." You know what, Robbie? I have considered it, and I decided that the effort would not be worth the payoff. Hell, I even considered getting a Santa costume for this video, which I actually probably would have done if I had thought of it sooner, but alas, I didn't think of it until the day before recording day, and I don't want to be waiting until the last minute to record a video just for a visual gag that would only really be mildly amusing for about a week after the video was posted. Thanks for watching, thanks to Tim Robertson for being my Patreon manager, and special thanks as always to my patrons, Robin Cohen and all the rest, who are the soldiers fighting against the celebration of the wanton, wasteful, indulgent holiday that is my channel. If you'd like to pretend that my videos somehow negate millions of people's holiday festivities just by virtue of their very existence, you can join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per week over at patreon.com/ViceRhino, or by supporting the channel in one of the other methods that can be found at links.vicerhino.com. which is also where you'll find links to my various other projects. If for whatever reason you want to send me stuff, my P.O. Box address is in the description. See you next time! Patreon.com/VicedRhino. Come on, why do you always freeze up there? And why don't I have this memorized yet?